your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now! Here comes the jam, getting down with the truth, the only way he knows how to. Girl, Lord, what's his name? We're calling the chief. You're damn right, he's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth, you know what a track down the truth, you know what do they call him? We call him the chief. You're damn right we do.
I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, on Pop Culture Minesfield's Morning Coffee with the Chief. Hey, you can find us every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on YouTube or on Rumble. And I think we also show this on the Pop Culture Minefield's Facebook page and their Twitter feed. You can also find me on X at LAC Jordan, where I talk about a lot of public policy issues, a little different than what I do here, where we go over movies. Now, we have a really interesting movie today. It's 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and it's seen as a crime drama, but it's really more about the interaction of local law enforcement in a small town with its citizens, with some dramatic twists here in the movie. But I have a couple retired LA County Sheriff Sergeants come to go over this movie today. But before we get into that, let's talk about the Los Angeles Mission. As I have talked before, I've been pushing this for my entire show. The Los Angeles Mission meets the needs of the homeless down in Skid Row in Los Angeles. They provide wraparound services, some basic services, and then wraparound services for those who want to get off the streets and hope to integrate them back in society. They do have a faith-based element, and it is that faith-based element that precludes them from getting government money. So they rely on small donations from me and you to help. Now, I have to tell you, in California, we got some really bad public policy, but some of the good or the shining lights in terms of homeless have been places like the Los Angeles Mission, the Union Rescue Mission, that have some kind of faith-based element. They've focused on their core mission, that is to help the people on Skid Row. They can't outright reject policies of the government because they're their partners, but I think some of the poor policy decisions here in California have only increased our homelessness. But these guys, they keep slugging, keep doing a good job. They've been around for about 85 years. Look them up at losangelesmission.org and make a donation today and help out today. So let's bring on our guests here and to go over this movie. And the first guest is Scott Orr, retired sergeant from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And Scott has been with us before, and he's back now after some medical stuff. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Good, Pat. Glad to be here.
Now, Scott is a California refugee. He's left the state. He's fleeing all the crazy politics, and we spent probably our whole time in the green room talking about that stuff and not the movie. So we'll have a lot of time to talk about the movie today, or a lot of new things to talk about in relation to the movie. But I also have retired Sergeant Danny Coon, who's been on before. He's a returnee, and he is slugging it out in California, just like I am, against all the crazy policies in the state. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
I'm good, Chief. Thank you for having me on again. This is a blast, and we got a lot of fun to talk about today because this is one foul-mouthed woman.
Yeah, let me introduce the movie, and then we'll talk a little bit about her, because I really like her as an actress. And so this is 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. It was released in 2017 as a crime drama. The film was written and directed and produced by Martin McDonagh. It stars Frances McDormand, which is the lady you're talking about, right? And she was in Fargo too, right? And I really like her as an actress. And I'm sure back in the day she was beautiful, but that isn't what makes her the actress, right? Is this character that she takes on, right, Danny?
Yeah, she played one mean woman. I mean, And, you know, everything about her, the way they did the makeup on her to make her look like a hard person. And then, you know, the area they were at in some small town, Missouri, is just that type of the kind of person you would expect to see. So they did a real good job with her, and she did a great job acting. She played that part. She probably lived it for a little bit just to get it down right, but she played it really good. And I believe she got an Academy Award out of it.
She did. She was nominated, and well, let me go over that a little bit. This it was highly acclaimed. It's got a great ensemble cast. It's got Woody Harrelson and Sam Rockwell. Now I always, when I look at these, it's the goofball actors that really, I think, because it's this guy Sam Rockwell. He plays this dummy cop in the town, right? He acts like an idiot. Well, he is an idiot, the character. And I think that's got to be, if you're an actor, that's got to be, those are the most challenging roles. Those are the most fun roles. Those are the most interesting, because it's such a deviation from the norm, I think. But he does a fantastic, and I think Woody Harrelson does a good job here too, right? And
Good.
and then the vertically challenged. Hey, so what's the politically correct term for a dwarf, right? A vertically challenged, is that okay? I mean, I don't know.
You were asking the wrong guy about being politically correct.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, Chief, but you got the two most unpolitically correct people guest today.
Peter Dinklage, and now he was in Game of Thrones, and where he played Tyrion Lannister, and I really loved that series as well. And but he does a great job here too. So a great ensemble cast. But yes, it was nominated for, let's see, Golden Globe Awards and Screen Actors Awards. It also received Academy Award nominations, 7 actually, including Best Picture and Best Actress and Best Supporting Actor, and that was for Rockwell. But McDormand, she won for Best Actress in the movie. So you're right, she did win. And I have to tell you, this is about a woman who, she's living in some rural town, Missouri, and her daughter is, we'll get in a little plot a little bit. Her daughter is raped and murdered, and the police have not found her killer, and she is angry, and she rents some billboards. Well, let's roll the first scene because it kind of lays it out, and she's calling out the cops. So here are the decrepit billboards. And she's driving by them, and she gets this idea. So, Scott, when you see this, does this remind you a little bit of home? Some of those abandoned roads that were one time important, maybe to logging communities that aren't so important anymore?
Where I'm at, Pat? No, there's no roads that were ever really important, I guess. Well, Tennessee State 412 does go through the town, but our town was much smaller than that.
Up in Washington,
we have a courthouse.
Yeah.
No, in Washington, no, we didn't have any billboards. But there's no billboards where I'm at now either. But the town we're in now we're outside of the town we're in now is like 800 people. So county, I think, has 1,500.
Yeah, I can remember driving through some desolate areas as a kid where in Michigan, rural Michigan, where towns were, at one time they were important, but then they weren't important. And then you saw, Rust Belt.
When I drive the 40, you can see all the towns that were on the Route 66, like Tucumcari in New Mexico. It's like,
I was going to say,
you can
old Route 66. That's where you can see all the stuff.
Yeah, you could see where it was flourishing at one time, but now I always just drove through the 40 and never stopped. Well, this time on the way back, I'm like, I'm going to drive through the town. That was a waste of about 15 minutes.
Just don't get off in Albuquerque because it's a murder to get. It's just hard to find a freeway on-ramp.
Well, her daughter's been murdered, and so she sees these billboards, and she sees the rusted sign on it, and which surprisingly they have, obviously this is the movies, but they have an advertising agency that still owns those, and she rents them, and she puts up a message to the police. And it's interesting. Well, first of all, she had to pay $5,000 a month for these billboards that nobody, as the movie goes on, you realize not that many people take that road, right? So
Right.
I would thought that was pretty expensive. But so here's her negotiating with the ad folks.
Well, I like the part where he's like, "We have billboards out there."
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about her motivation here. So her daughter's murdered. We find that out later, and the cops haven't captured, and she's angry. So we find out a little later. There's a lot of survivor's guilt going on here too. But this is a mom who lost her daughter and feels like the system is not doing everything they can to catch her. Not unusual, Danny, right?
That's right. But you know what I get a kick out of in this movie? It's only been 7 months. The daughter was killed, and she's putting up these billboards and causing all kinds of havoc. It's only been 7 months. And when I was a detective, I'd catch a case, and sometimes it would take a year to investigate.
Yeah.
And I'd get people calling me all the time. What about my case? Well, your case is in the back burner right now because I got all these other cases to do. Now, obviously, murder is going to take over all the other cases, but I mean, there's some murder cases out there that are going on for 20, 30 years. And so you just gotta be patient. They're going to get solved. Just got to be patient.
Yeah, I bet you the chief says that somebody will talk to somebody and it'll come out, right? But
Right.
but she's angry. We find out later why she's angry. She's angry at herself. She's angry about a lot of stuff. But I don't know, Scott. The other thing about this is small town cops. Now, you grew up in a relatively small town, right, in Washington,
Yeah.
and the interaction between the small and everybody knows everybody, right? And you see that in this movie.
That's
And
what's hard, when you're a teenager and you're out doing teenager stuff, and then before you even get home, your parents know, especially my dad. Be like, what were you doing out last night? And it's like, oh, I was just driving around. Really? Because that's not what, and it's like, well, who told you that? Oh, I saw Mr. So-and-so when I was having coffee. And and my dad was a businessman in in the downtown right by the police department, like 4 doors down.
right.
And so you couldn't, everybody knows your business. Even where I'm at now, everybody knows I'm the cop from California. Even though I've never told anybody but my neighbor that.
Yeah.
But, oh, you're the cop from California. Yeah, that's me. So yeah, these small towns, and I love the way they go on and later and everybody's against her because they all love the chief.
Right.
And even
Right.
I think you hear where he's like, "You sure you want to put these billboards up?" And when he reads what she wants,
Well, first of all, I think I can understand a survivor's frustration with the system and being the inability. And I think the thing about it is she says, how hard could this be? But it isn't. A
it isn't
stranger
easy.
abduction and rape is a lot harder to solve than where there's a relationship. And you find out later that there is no real relationship that they're aware of, right? I mean, like Danny, so then lots of times there's a connection between the victim and the suspect. In this case, there appears not to be a connection between the victim and the suspect.
Yeah. I forgot the percentages, but they're very high percentages that the suspect in murder cases are known by the victim.
Particularly, with a rape of a woman, it's usually it's probably 80%, if not more than that. It's pretty high.
It's higher than that, but it's pretty
Yeah.
high. I just don't have the numbers offhand.
So a stranger abduction and rape and murder is really hard, to solve.
Especially like, okay, that road there, who knows where it really goes to, but that's a road out of town, and that the stranger abduction there is just someone, oh, here's an opportunity. Here's a girl pissed off at her mom walking down the thing. We'll do our thing and keep on going. And, it's almost impossible to find out unless there's a DNA hit somewhere along the line.
See, I have a different opinion on that.
Go ahead.
I mean, I agree with Danny that, stranger, I mean, look how long the Green River Killer up in Washington
Yeah.
State.
Yeah.
I mean, it took them decades to finally catch him. And but this is like, it's a road that nobody would normally take except somebody who lives in the area, to me.
Yeah.
And once they did all the DNA databases across, like he said, I could go across the world, and if we don't get a hit, we don't get a hit. There's nothing I could do about that. And that's my thing, was like, well, if we're not getting a hit, maybe you start looking inward. instead of outward.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I mean, she does eventually, when let's roll the scene, small town police. When the chief eventually goes and talks to her, she said, "Well, why don't you test the DNA of everybody in the town?" And go ahead and roll the next scene, Martin.
In England, they had a murder in England, and they did that. They DNA'd everybody in the little shire or whatever they call it.
Yeah, I know, that's called The Blooding. I read the book. It was by
Yeah,
Joseph
The
Wambaugh, and
Blooding.
we gotta do a shout out. Joseph Wambaugh, the great writer and former LAPD lieutenant, passed away recently. He wrote the book. I think it's called The Blooding, and it lays out the very first use of DNA to solve a rape and murder. The guy had raped and murdered 2 people. In fact, I thought a few years ago they were going to let him out of prison. It's England. They have some weird rule. Well, we do it now here. You get a senior citizen discount. If you do 25 years in prison, we'll let you out no matter how bad you've screwed up, right? So that's just but yeah, but they that's what they did. They convinced everybody to give DNA. And actually, the suspect in that case, I think his name is Cooper. I don't know why I remember that. The suspect got somebody else, I think, to give their DNA, and so there was a hiding of it. It was a really interesting case, right? And they eventually figured it out. But so here it is. The cops are mad at the advertising guy that these billboards went up, and I don't know if he plays a sergeant in this movie or a corporal. He looks like he did corporal stripes. Here's our chief, Woody Harrelson. Don't like his politics, but I do like him as an actor. His dad was a hitman. You know that?
Did not know that.
You did not know that? Oh yeah,
No.
I think he killed a federal judge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Not.
His brother's on TV selling CBD.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Harold.
Harrelson's CBD.
Well, yeah, you have to wonder how much dope did Woody smoke before he started doing this movie, because he's known for that. And like you, Pat, I like his acting ability, but his personal life,
Yeah.
don't agree with.
Well,
Yeah,
he
exactly.
does talk about, there are civil rights things here. We can't do that. We can't just test everybody, and he kind of lays out what he's did, and you get the hey, hi Bill, welcome to the show. You get the impression that, well, it's good because it lays out, okay, because at first I'm thinking, okay, these are podunk cops, they don't know what they're doing, but he kind of lays out what they did, which, okay, he's done the basics that you should do for a murder like this. He's got DNA. They followed up on the leads. They have no witnesses, and he lays that all out. What I see is she's really mad at him, but he's mad at what she did, but he actually has compassion. You can read it in his when he talks to her. He understands. He's still talking to the advertising guy, but he does eventually talk to the mom, and he does actually care about. I want to solve this. This is not something I want to let go. I want to catch this guy. That's what they do, and I don't know. I go ahead.
He has as much frustration as she does, probably, because he, when you get a case like that, you do get frustrated when you keep everything you hit is a dead end, and then you got the parents of the victim biting you in the hips to get it solved. And so he was showing some frustration too.
Well, like Danny said, it's only been 7 months. I mean, it's not like years have rolled by. And I read where the writer and the director and the producer, McDonagh, got his idea driving through Texas. He saw a billboard with the same type of thing, calling out the Vidor Police Department about an investigation to a woman that was murdered.
Oh, really?
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was
paid over $200,000. He was riding in a Greyhound around the United States and saw this billboard. He's a British guy, and the family's paid like $200,000 over the years to keep the billboard. It was only one billboard, but keep it up for all these years.
Yeah,
so that's where
this is loosely based on a true story.
Yeah.
Well, we do start seeing Dixon, this guy right here, who's a nut. Now I think he's marching over to beat up Red, or he's going to confront Red here.
Well, he's angry too because his dad had died, and now he's stuck with his alcoholic mother.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, here's the thing, it's like you grow up in a small town, and you see the nutcase or the knucklehead in town, and then he ends up as the local cop.
Right.
I mean, does that happen or what? I mean, he's picked last for the baseball team. He's not, he's marginalized. He's this, he's that. Nobody, and he ends up the cop. And of course, all the reasons why he's not picked for the baseball team or anything else come out when he's a cop. I mean, that sometimes that does happen, right? You get these charity hires in the small town.
Well, Pat, here's the deal. It's I'm going to age myself here because when I went to high school, we actually had auto shop.
I had welding, auto shop.
Wood shop, auto shop, metal shop, all that.
Yeah.
We had all those shops. Well, our auto shop teacher, he used probably once or twice a week, he would say, who becomes cops? The kids that are bullied in high school.
Really?
And that's, and I grew up in Orange County, and he was saying this. So it was just kind of funny to hear it come out of his mouth.
Well, I know
my brother-in-law says that all the time.
Well, so when you went back home, Scott, after years, and you find certain people that you grew up with, you go, he's doing what? Did any of that? Do you ever see? Not necessarily a cop, but anything.
Well, I would get, did they do a background check on you? Yeah.
It's like now we go, how did that guy make captain?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I actually got that, because nobody knew who I was, because I wasn't much of a politicker, right, on the department. Who is that guy, right? And it's like, well, I'm just the guy who ground out work. That's all. I wasn't golfing. No, I was doing work. So,
but you weren't your typical Adam Henry sergeant to make lieutenant or anything like that. There were some knuckleheads that I made captain. I'm going, well, I know one guy, he had to sue the department just to get to the first step. So,
right.
Well, I had a lieutenant. I said, it's probably good, sir, you weren't in Vietnam. He's like, why? I said, I think your own troops would have killed you.
True.
He did not think that was funny.
No. Well, at first, here's the mom, and she's got her billboards, and of course, she gets the attention of the local media, and she's out doing interviews, and she's angry, and she is a better looking woman, Danny, than what they show in this picture. But yeah, that's true, and I think she also has a teenage son, and he's under pressure because it's a small town, and she's being very strident in her criticism of police, and that's impacting him as well, right? You see this dynamic, and I think I got, here's the survivor's anger, guilt, and I don't remember if this is a scene or not, but it does show an interaction between the mom and the daughter who's murdered. So there's a flashback, and you hear this exchange. Maybe that's a later scene, but I might as well just talk about it now, because it really motivates why she's so pressed in this issue. Is the daughter says she wants to borrow the car, which is a typical teenage thing, right? I need to borrow the car. Mom says no, and you can walk, which that'd be something I said. I could see myself saying that. My kids wanted a car for college. I says, well, you live close to college and walk. That's what God made feet. I could see myself saying that, right? And I swear to God, they wanted me to buy them cars. So I said, yeah, I'm paying for your college. You just get live on campus. Oh, Dad, how do I get a date? So if you have to have a car to get a date with a girl, then you know what? You don't want that girl. Trust me. So that was my opinion. But
you didn't have time for love anyway. You're going to college to study.
You're going to college. You should be studying, right?
Right.
And so
yeah, I forgot that. I forgot that part when I went to the University of Montana, that you actually had to go to class. You couldn't go fishing or hunting all the time.
So here's Woody Harrelson talking to her, but she in the flashback, it lays out what happened. She says, well, I hope I get raped, and Mom yells back, I hope you get raped too, and she does get raped and murdered. So there's a lot of survivor's guilt here going on, Danny, right? And that's a very strong motivator for parents. Even if you didn't have an exchange list, you still feel like you could have done something.
Right. So survivor guilt's a real thing. In the big picture, we'll just look at Carl Hettinger from LAPD in Campbell and the Onion Field shooting. Carl Hettinger dealt with survivor's guilt for the rest of his life. It ended up killing him at 59 years old. He's a stone cold alcoholic by then. But you get a lot of the guys coming back that came back from Vietnam. And I haven't seen any studies on the guys coming back from the global war on terror, but the guys coming back from Vietnam definitely had all kinds of survivor's guilt and mental health issues from that. Now, this lady here, it's kind of obvious through the movie that she's part of a very dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
Her husband or ex-husband, I'm trying to figure out. I kind of thought that he was a cop at one time, maybe in another town. And, he ran off with some 13-year-old and
19.
Yeah, acted like a 13.
Yeah.
He ran off with someone else and she's sitting there left holding the bank, and the kids show little or no respect to her, and she shows little or no respect to them because a whole bunch of F-bombs and C-bombs, and then it's like, wow. One thing I get is did she have a wardrobe? Because she always wore the same overall.
Yeah. Was that her uniform for work? I think partly. I don't know.
You work in a gift shop. You're wearing overalls.
Didn't she wear it on her date with the? I don't know. Like Peter Dinklage calls himself a dwarf in the movie, so I guess you can call him a dwarf. But
she did eventually go on a date. But here, so she, all right. The point I get is, all right, Scott, you investigated gang murders too. You show up at the family's house. They feel guilty that they should have done more with their kid, right? They might be angry at you. They might be angry at the other gang, but they're also, that guilt is driving a lot of their emotion, right?
yeah, and a lot of the dads never really said anything. Well, depends on which gang it was. If there was a dad involved, but the moms were always like, what should I have done? What could I have done different? Well, some of them you could have done a lot of things different, but you don't tell them that. I mean,
No.
you feel bad for them. You don't. I mean, even these guys that are all bravado and talk about, oh, I don't. I mean, you go see enough dead bodies, like I took a promotion rather than going to homicide, and it was because I saw 50 murders a year because the only overtime OSS got was assisting homicide. So every time there was a murder in Compton, I was the first one. I'll be there because I wanted the money and the overtime. So, you go look at so many dead bodies. It's like, do I really want to leave my family anymore in the middle of the night to go up to Antelope Valley and look at a dead gangster or a dead body?
No.
It's like, no, I don't want to do it anymore. I didn't have it in me to do it anymore. So.
Yeah, but did you have that mom, that lingering mom that pressured you? What are you doing? Are you doing more? Maybe not you because you're OSS, you're just assisting homicide, but there's mothers who are. Part of their guilt
they
is
would come to the station in Compton. What are you doing to solve the murder of my son? It's like, ma'am, I'm not homicide. I assisted them. You saw me out there. I gave you my card. They gave you your cards. Call them. I can't comment on that's their deal. You got to deal with them. No, but you talk to me when I come into the station. I think sometimes they just want somebody to talk to them.
Yeah.
You're right.
Reassure them that something's going on. Somebody's doing something to solve their case. And eventually, gang cases, I don't want to say they were easy because we had some pretty tough cases. But eventually, you find out who.
Yeah, because somebody will talk.
Maybe they can't prove who it is, but you find out who it is.
Yeah, I was at Compton a couple of years after you, and it was the same thing. It to me, it didn't seem like no matter what kind of case it was.
Yeah, and there'd be like 10 of them coming into the station.
Yeah, they just fill up the lobby and go, oh, crap.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, well,
and you feel bad when you leave. You feel like somebody's, even though they're crying and they're pleading with you to help them find their killer of their son, and it's like you feel so when you leave, it's like you're depleted. It's like, they're so emotional. It's like they put all that emotion on you, and you got to walk away with it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people think that, cops are these robots or expect us to be robots, but it does wear you down at some point. Some guys can't handle it and it burns them out.
Well, I've had, Danny R. Smith on my show, and he publicly talks about how it impacted him with post-traumatic stress, because I forget what he had, like 98 death cases. I think was what he called them. None of them were murders, but it ultimately had an impact on him, right? And it has an impact on a lot of the homicide guys, and I'm sure our gang guys as well. But your comments really portray the character's reaction, and that's our chief. That's Woody Harrelson. He does feel it, and you can see it in his character and how he interacts with, even though he's mad at. He's, he's mad at our mom here. Let me get her character name here. So he's mad at Mildred.
Yeah. They even
But
give her a name, make her look like that, and then give her a name like Mildred.
yeah, I know. But he understands her, right? He understands.
Right.
And he feels guilty, which is, that's right, Dan. That's part of it, Danny. That post-traumatic stress is, the way I always kind of equate it to, it's how I felt after the Chatsworth train crash, 25 dead, 45 injured, and you're responding there, and you've been trained do this, do that to help save lives, and there was absolutely nothing. There were people who were there who were dead, people who were dying, and there was nothing you were going to be able to do about it. So the whole hero complex where you're going to come in and save people ain't going to happen, and you're going to live with that guilt for the rest of your life because you couldn't help them. For some of the guys that responded, just before me, the best they could do was hold the hand of the person who was dying because there was nothing they could do for him. The paramedics were focused on the ones they felt they could save, not the ones they didn't think they could save, right? And you live with those emotions, whether it's responding after the fact to investigate a homicide or something like the Chatsworth train crash. Cops live with that for the rest of life, and you see the emotion that it has on the chief as well, right?
Yeah, well, the chief had several issues going on, but
yes, he did.
He's dealing with the stress and the PTSD from that, and when you get into situations, us as cops, we tend to compartmentalize it. So when I spent 31 years stuffing soil, and then you throw my army time, and then you spent 34 years stuffing stuff down inside of you, and eventually it's going to come out.
Yep.
And unless you have a good support group and some good guys, and one thing about big city cops is I think big city cops are a little bit more resilient than the small town cops because we see more of it, and not that you get used to it, but you learn how to deal with it a little bit better. Now, on top of the stress from this murder and the repercussions from that, Chief Willoughby was dying of pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And that's a painful death. I just had a friend of mine, the best man at my wedding, my best friend, passed away from pancreatic cancer. And it was just horrible.
It eats you up.
Yeah, it was horrible what it did to him. And the outcome, we'll get to this point later on, of what happened to Chief Willoughby is I can understand that because it's kind of hits several different roads on the fatal 10.
Yeah, my uncle died of pancreatic cancer too, and he fought it to the end. He managed to get cancer free, but then a few years later it returned and was throughout his body. But he gave a good fight. That's a courageous fight.
Yeah.
When you have that. Well, let's now. I can't remember when our priest shows up to talk to Mildred. I can't remember what scene that was, but that was pretty interesting. I got a note here. She's a former churchgoer. So
I love your analogy, though. It's perfect.
It was classic.
Right. Well, so the son is obviously going to school. I couldn't tell if it was a Catholic school or what, because why would the priest come, and she just lays him out talking about police sexual abuses and all that stuff over the years. And she does, because he's trying to shame her into changing her behavior towards the chief. And this is having a problem with your son. And she just lays him out.
Yeah,
What'd
I love
you
how
think?
she throws out the law that we used all the time in gangs about culpability. The law that California passed that, hey, if you're involved in the gang and there's something goes down, you're just as culpable as the rest of them. And I remember when I was at Compton, the FBI was going after Compton Barrio T Flats for RICO. But yeah, so I love how she just kind of turns it around. It's like, look, you're just as culpable. If your parishioners are doing something and you know about it, but you turn a blind eye, you're just as guilty as them.
Yeah. Yep.
And then he
Don't
turned
put-
it around
mince words.
on his fellow priest. He turned it around on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the kid's reaction at the end. Well, thanks for stopping by.
I do like the son's character in here. I can't remember which what his he's great. I like him in the. He's like, there goes mom again. That's
Yeah.
kind of there. Oh, here we go. What's gonna happen now with mom? Right? He loves his mom. He was there when the daughter and the mom had, so he knows what's going on, right? And
Right.
and he understands what's going on. He ends up standing up for his mom when his dad comes over. But he, it's like, oh, here we go. But one of the things that I was interesting how, because lots of times, like I went to Catholic schools and my kids went to Catholic schools, and there was a problem. And on the playground one time, and my son had to get involved to stop some kid from beating up another kid. Right? They were young. I think they were fourth grade or fifth grade, something like that. And the principal was a nun, and she would wear the whole, garb, right? And the dad, whose kid was getting beat up, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, we're going to do this, and so we go together to talk to him. And as soon as we get in that room, this little, 4'9" nun, he melts. All of his bravado goes away. I mean, I'm like, and he was a lawyer, I'm like, okay. And I was like, okay, sister, hey, I just want my son to have to be the referee on the playground anymore, so either this kid goes or he gets help or whatever, and so the kid to get out of school. But just the mere fact that they show up with their collar and stuff like that, or a nun, some people, because they've been so conditioned in the Catholic Church, like I saw this guy, he melted in public. He had gone to the school as a kid, he had been part of the parish for 50 years. This was a new parish. I didn't know any of these people. So, but it was just interesting to see. And she was having none of it. I'm sure she was a good parishioner, but she's also angry. She's angry at God too, right, Danny? That's what comes through here. She's angry at God.
She's
right?
angry at everybody.
Yeah, I don't think she was angry, like Danny said, at everybody. It didn't matter who you were. It's like there's a lot of anger there. The whole town was angry.
I thought at some point she was just going to go out and smack the crap out of Dixon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's. I kept waiting for that moment to come. When is she just going to go lay into him?
Well, I just, that does happen though. I mean, when you have these events, why did God allow this to happen? And suddenly, church leaders, whether Catholic or Protestant, whatever, they're people lose their faith because these tragic things that happen, right? And they wonder, how could God let something like this happen? You're a faithful person, Danny. What do you think about that? That does happen. That's a test of faith. That's what they call the test of faith, right?
I write a blog on it.
You wrote a book on it, huh?
Wrote a blog.
Actually, a blog on it. Okay.
When there was a couple of when the LA County firefighter got murdered up at I think it was 83's in Antelope Valley or Salt Lake Canyon, when Clinton got murdered, and then forgot the name of the deputy who he was off duty, walked into a fast food place, and he was murdered ordering whatever he was ordering. And after each one of those, and even when the Riverside County deputy was murdered, the motorcycle cop was murdered last year, I updated these blogs on why does God let bad things happen to good people. And the simple answer is that we were born into sin. We live in a sinful world, and it's going to happen. It's not God's fault, even though we all get angry at God because something bad happened, but it's not his fault. It's our own fault because of the way we live and what we were born into.
Yeah.
And that's our choice to be angry, not God's choice, because he would rather have things perfect, but that got screwed up a long time ago.
I think one of the reasons why this movie was so successful, it taps into a lot of those different themes that people can relate to, right? Let's roll with the angry chief. I call it angry chief, but in reality, he's not. And and then the fat dentist. I like this, so
Fat dentist.
and he's getting his checkup, right, and he's angry because he's dying and he knows it, right, and he's not ready to die. He's got young kids, right, he's got a beautiful wife at home, and he can't solve this murder. I mean, it's he's tired of it. He's angry, and you see him go off here, right? He's going through his own. There's stages of dealing with terminal illness, right? Both for the person who's dying and the family that's supporting him, and he's going through that. And but I just what you come away with this, like I said, Woody Harrelson is still a compassionate guy. He cares about his town, he cares about his family, and he cares about Mildred, even though Mildred is a pain in the butt for him. And he even cares about this guy Dixon, who is just for me, it would be an anchor around my neck. He'd have been on the 3 strikes you're out plan for Captain Jordan, right? So he'd have been long gone. But there's a soft spot for him, even from the chief, for this guy. Yeah. What do you think of this dynamic between the chief and Dixon here, Scott? Would you have tolerated Dixon?
Oh no. Come on, Pat. You know me. I don't tolerate fools at all. As evident as Sergeant Orr told me this. Yeah, because you're an idiot. But I don't know. He has a soft spot for him for some reason, and he's loyal to the guy. But I love this scene where he's like, "Give me the case on Hayes," and he's like, "Which one?" He's like, he goes, "The Mildred one or the daughter's name?" And he's like, "There is no Mildred case." He goes, "Yeah, we have 2 official complaints. One with the lady with the weird eye and the fat dentist."
Fat dentist.
He's like, "No, there's no Mildred case." I mean,
Well,
he's a dumbass, but sometimes you have misplaced loyalties, as you kind of know, Pat.
yeah.
You think
Well,
somebody's going to do right by you, and they turn out to be an idiot.
he
I
is
mean,
trying to train this guy to have a little more
right.
compassion for this stuff, and there's like a mental block. This guy Dixon just can't do it, right? I mean, he eventually gets there after going through a lot of trauma, the character-wise, but he keeps trying with this guy. I don't know. It would have been okay. This one's a lost cause, but yeah, I never really had to lead in a small town where I don't know. Does Dixon's mom, is she politically connected? Is she just I don't know. For me, it's like, why do they keep this guy around?
The
Yeah, Dixon.
county I live in, half the guys have never been to an academy because they can't afford to send them to one. So it's,
Okay,
hey, Joe
so
Schmo over here, he's a good guy. Let's make him a deputy. So they put
we'll
on their
see.
own little training and let him drive around with the regular deputy, and then he's off on his own. He's never been to
Oh, we got
never
Martin.
been to
You could throw your comment back up there, Martin. I'll read it. Let's see. Willoughby understands where Dixon's shortcomings are coming from. He knows if he lets go of his anger, he can be much more. Yeah, I think he mentioned something about him, being gay or something like that, where this anger's coming from. Being with your henpecked mom, I had to moved out a long time ago. That's also part of it, right? But I don't know what they
what
paid.
his dad died, and then he had to
Stuck.
move in with the mom.
Yeah,
That
well, he was under the influence of his mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd say, "This is happening." Well, she'd go, "Well, this is how you handle that," or "This is what you do." And it's like, what does she know? As they're both sitting there sucking down a Bud Light or whatever they were drinking.
So the sheriff, the police chief gets bad. Harrelson gets bad because the doctor is saying, "Hey, we're all with you regarding the billboards," right? And that's really what set off his anger. Now here, it's kind of interesting. Now she's at the dentist, similar kind of thing. Why are you doing this? And he's going to take care of a tooth, but at first he's not going to give her Novocaine. This is the pressure of a small town. I guess I personally don't understand it because I lived in big cities my whole life, right? So the other than your close group, your peer group, I'm not really all that worried about what the dentist thinks, right? Other than that he's competent. And you can see she's mad that he's asking about this, and then she takes the drill and drives it into the dentist's thumb, which is You know, it's a funny scene.
Yeah,
Everybody like
I
to do
mean,
that. When I worked in Avalon, the dentist there, he was a big guy too, and he had big hands like the dentist here. And I'm thinking to myself when I lived there, why do people go to this guy? How does he get his hands back to the back of your mouth to fix
Right.
something?
Right.
It's
Right.
just too big. There you
yeah.
go. My wife and I, whenever we had dental issues, we'd always take the boat back to the mainland and get fixed there.
Well, he was the only dentist in town, probably, right? And he probably
Yeah.
worked on. They had a lot of I don't want to say illegals, but a lot of Latino workers that were working on the island, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
About 3,000 of them.
What was the total population on the island?
When I worked there, the official population was about 3,500.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And,
So it was wow.
and the migrant population was probably added another 1,500 onto that.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Because they were, some of the low income hotels that were housing the workers, they were hot bunking.
Oh, yeah.
They'd go in, get 6 hours of sleep, go to work, hang out for another 6 hours, and then get back in their bed and you're hot bunking. You're sleeping in a bed. 3 other people are, 2 other people are sleeping. It was
I
just,
had to do that in the Marine Corps. Yeah, on a ship.
yeah.
So
You're
she
on
calls
12. They're off for 12. You're on for 12, and you come back. Bed's still warm. It was gross.
Was that on ships?
damp.
Is that how that works, Scott? On ships, or was that just in regular barracks too?
Well, now the ship. I mean, we were using old, Marine Corps. Not LSTs. I can't remember the Peleliu and the Tarawa, and they're a helicopter, and they had the bays where they had the amphibious tracks.
Yeah.
And so you would work for 12 hours, and then the next guy, he's sleeping while you're working, and then you just turn around and come back. But when it's those old ships, the ventilation wasn't that great.
Right.
Like my son was when he was, he got out 6 years ago, 7 years ago now. And he did a float through the Mediterranean for like 9 months, and went into Africa and did a bunch of stuff there and stuff like that. But he said he was a corporal, so he shared a room with another corporal, and they both had their own separate beds and a bathroom. And he goes, wasn't that bad. And I'm like, shit, I was a corporal. It didn't matter. You're still off fucking with everybody. Some other guy. You get your own bed. It's gross.
So in the scene, the chief does go, and I think they arrest Mildred, but he calls the dentist Fat Joffrey too. It wasn't a whole lot of compassion for the dentist in this one. But again, I think you see the interaction between the chief and Mildred, and there is.
Well, she's got a loose tooth, and he says it's got to come out, but then he pulls out the drill.
Yeah, I know.
I would have been like, no, time out here. I've had teeth pulled. That's not what you was going to try to just inflict some pain on her.
So, but in their confrontation, they're talking. I think this is the scene where Woody Harrelson character ends up spitting blood in her face, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, it's his illness coming up, and you immediately see he's ashamed that he did it, right? He's embarrassed and ashamed, and she's immediately compassionate, right? She switches, angry mom to, all right, I'm busting your balls here, but okay, let me take care of you and let me get you out of here. Let me get you to the hospital, kind of thing. And she immediately switches to, all right, I know this guy for his whole life, probably. I'm giving him a hard time, but it's time for me to do the right thing, right? That's what I saw in the scene, and that's where you see the compassion between these two people. And at one time was probably really, really, I don't say they were really close, but there was a respect between the two, understanding that they probably had been to her house a few times when she was married to her previous husband, right?
Wasn't he a cop in the town?
Yeah, I don't.
He's an ex-cop.
I get that he was an ex-cop from another town, but
Sure. But they've been to, that's the other thing about a small town, right? As you said, Scott, everybody knows everything. Everybody knows about every argument that occurred, every, domestic, I don't want to say violence thing, but at least every conflict thing that happened. When the kids, well, as you know, when you were out cow tipping, everybody knew that you were out cow tipping, right? So all that stuff, right?
Stealing
That's
pumpkins. Yeah.
yeah. that, and that this is the dynamic that maybe some of us big city guys can't understand is, and you see that relationship come out, right? Because there is a relationship there with these guys.
What she did
Well, I
was,
think they needed that scene though, Pat, to kind of show that, up to that point, they've just shown her as this hardcore,
Yeah,
angry at the world. I'm going to kick everybody's butt. And then all of a sudden this happens and he's very embarrassed because,
yeah,
basically spit up blood on her. And then all of a sudden she went from this hardcore, what are you going to do to me? It's his word against mine. And then all of a sudden now she's like, I'm going to get you help.
yeah,
And I
it,
think
it
they
goes back the
wanted to
first.
show that she had some compassion. She wasn't just all about raising hell with everybody.
Yeah, the first time he went out to talk to her about the billboards, he had made something insinuated that he had some type of medical issue that he was dealing with, and she goes, "Oh, come on, Willoughby, everybody knows you have cancer." But I don't think anybody knew the severity of it. So when he coughed up blood and it went on her, that's when she realized, "Oh crap, this is worse than everybody thinks."
right.
And,
Yeah.
and then she went
Yeah.
right into mother mode to take care of him and do what she needed to do.
I like what he did later in the movie, and we'll get into that. To acknowledge, basically acknowledges Mildred's suffering and pain, and we'll get it. It's fun. Let's roll with the next scene, Mom's Guilt. This we already talked a little bit about this, but this does show the flashback between the daughter and this is the only real time you see the daughter in this scene. Here she is. She wants the car, and there's the son, which I like his character. He's a good character. And she's just typical teenage thing. I want the keys of the car. I need the car, right? And it's just a typical fight. Now, I will tell you that didn't really happen in my house very much. I basically, when my kids turned 18, said, "Well, you can't tell me what time I need to be home." I'll tell you the story because I said, "Yeah, you're right. I can't, but the car has a curfew because I own it. It needs to be parked under that tree by midnight every night." And that ended that conversation. So, because that is my car and it has a curfew. So, these are the kind of things that happen with teenagers all the time, right? You can't tell me what to do. Give me what I want,
Yeah.
and that's why God made teenagers to test all the parents, right?
I'm
Test
sure
your
Scott and I,
patience.
well, all of us were raised and we're basically in the same generational group. Growing up, I had 3 other brothers, and it was well known that when you turn 18, you're either going to go to school and live at home for free, get a job and pay rent at home, or join the military. And it was also well known that when you want a car, you're going to work to get your own car, so and pay for your own insurance.
Yeah.
And that's how it was with me, and that's how it was with when my wife's kids. They would buy me this. No, work for it. And even my wife's oldest son, he tells his daughter and son, "No, you work for it. I worked for it. And that's how it was, and that's how it should be." And so, I think I stole my dad's truck one time and paid dearly for it.
Or you took it without
So
permission.
Yeah,
my dad bought a 1971 Ford and pickup truck. And I asked him one time when I got older, I said, "Hey, how come you never just gave me that truck?" And he said, "Because those keys were controlled." I said, I'm like, "What?" He goes, "The keys were controlled."
Ah,
And I never figured it out till like a year later, and I'm like, now I get it. I wasn't going anywhere without those keys, and it was his truck.
well, I mean, let's defend parents here. So we see the scene where the daughter's arguing, and the mom doesn't want her to have that freedom of having the car. That's what it's about. They
I think she
recognize that.
says you're high right now or something.
Yeah,
Or you've been
well,
smoking marijuana or something.
even if it was that, but it's partly, unfettered access to automobile means a lot more particularly in a small town. It's suddenly your world, which is maybe a few blocks, becomes a lot bigger, right? And the trouble you can get into can become a lot more complicated, right? Because you have wheels. You can go to the next town, you can go to the rave party that nobody wants you to go to. There's suddenly, and parents recognize that, right? I mean, I did. Hey, the car has a curfew, right? It has to be, as my new wife finds out, there's nothing good going on after midnight, right? There's no reason to be out past midnight, and of course, trying to tell a teenager that is a struggle. She did what for the daughter's driving drunk? Yeah, well, that's part of it, yes, but it's also, hey, how you doing, Gambit? It's also, as you said, Scott, it's control. No, you can't do this. There's nothing out there. You don't need this car. You can walk. That 3 blocks area is safe around town is safe, right? You can do that, and then it turns out to not be safe for her. But so my point is, this is a typical, maybe not quite all the yelling and screaming, and I hope I get raped. Yeah, I hope you get raped. Maybe not all that stuff, but this is a typical fight between a teenager and parents, right? Right, Danny?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Having a car is freedom. But, when I grew up, there was nothing to jump on my bike and ride from Angel Stadium to Huntington Beach to go to the beach. I mean, the bike was my transportation. So.
Yeah, it's lost its cool factor, right? But it was freedom. But I grew up in a large family, and there wasn't money. That was it, and God, I remember when I was. I would ride my bike to school for football practice. And it's like 5 miles away, so you drive 5 miles, do your football practice, go home. And even when you're doing doubles, and then I started working at the school, and, it's a different time. I was telling Mike just the other day, I realized why was I a C+ student? Well,
Pat,
it's because I worked every single day that I went to school. I worked every single day of break, unless I was on a vacation, and I worked some weekends too, because I worked at the school I went to, and you had to clean, wings of, clean the bathroom, clean the classrooms. That was my job as a student janitor at the school. And I thought about, God, I worked a ton. I had money too when I graduated, but that's why I was C+ student, because my wife went to my high school, and she says, well, we used to think you were really smart. I go, yeah, I was, but I didn't have time to do homework. Homework was for those who had money, not for me. I had, and it wasn't that all of my siblings also worked. It just, they just didn't work as much as I did. I looked back at how much I actually worked, and I go, wow, every single day I worked. Played football, went and cleaned a wing. Did competitive speaking, finished my job after that, and then got picked up at 11 o'clock at night. So that was my experience. But that's, I think, generationally, that's our experience.
Yeah, I'm like Danny. I have two younger brothers, and we didn't nothing. My dad used to say, nothing comes free.
Right.
Free for the only word free means is that you're free to say it. Because
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
But him and my grandmother owned a store that my grandma opened just prior to World War II. And then he also had his life insurance salesman job. So every time I say, hey, Dad, can I have money for gas? Back then gas was what, 70 cents, 60,
Yeah.
50 cents a gallon in the 70s. And he'd go, yeah, as soon as you come down to the store, I need this, and this done. Okay. So we never got, and then he'd make us cut wood on the weekends. We'd go out with him and fill up because that's how we heated our house. So we never got anything for free.
Right.
There was always a monetary something, if we wanted money from him, or when my mom didn't work, so it was all his money. It was the same thing. And then growing up in the town I grew up in, there was nothing open after 9.
All
My
right.
dad said the same thing.
I got to hit one more theme before we hit our break, and this is the scene where the dad comes in, and he, Mildred makes a comment about the 13-year-old, as you talk about, Danny, and the dad gets mad and goes after her assaults her, and the son, he comes up with a knife, puts it onto dad's throat. So this is where you really see, okay, yeah,
we don't have that scene.
You don't have that? Oh, no, I don't. I didn't pick that scene. I just want to talk about it in between.
Oh.
Okay, so, but this is where you really see it's a dysfunctional family, as you talked about, Danny, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
A lot of anger.
a lot of
all
anger there.
sides.
Well, and that violence is used to solve problems within the family, right? That's taught by dad, and certainly that's where Mildred gets her hardened view on the world, right?
Divorce when you have teenagers is almost always ugly.
Well, I know.
Yeah,
I'm glad
I
never
don't,
had to
but
go through
I've been to enough 415 families
that. Yeah, exactly.
where the kid's a teenager and mom and dad are split the sheets, and you're going, oh crap, why me?
Yeah, it's ugly. It can be ugly. All right, we are at the halfway mark, and Martine, I think, are you queued up for our halfway break?
Yes.
Let's roll with the break, and we'll be back in 2 minutes to Morning Coffee with the Chief.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Yeah, we got a comment from Gambit about the woke Snow White. I don't know. It's like getting some feedback on my side. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm getting kind of an echo.
Yes,
All right. Well,
I get that echo too. Let me mute.
say it again.
Try it again. Chief?
Yes.
Okay. Again?
1, 2, 3.
Again.
I got you. I can hear.
Okay.
I'm no longer getting the echo. You getting the echo, Martine?
Everything's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about, they're talking about the woke Snow White, which I think is crazy. They did this woke Snow White thing, and it's getting bombed at the box office, or they're not making any money on it. And I certainly am hopeful that Disney kind of gets back to its right footing. Of course, I'm going to spend some money at Disneyland here pretty soon, so they'll make some money on the theme parks, anyways. But yeah,
I'm taking a Disney cruise this Friday.
Are you really? Grandkids?
Not looking forward to it, but
well, at least you won't have to walk. The last time I do this once a year, and last year I did 24,000 steps at Disneyland. So now 10,000 is 5 miles. So it was over 10 miles around Disneyland. And, it isn't like you're doing a speed walk. It's walk to the next ride. And anyways, I was with my two granddaughters, right? And one of them, she's like 6. She won't hold my hand, right? She's all stubborn. And my daughter and the oldest one go run off to do a ride. I forget what roller coaster, but the youngest was too small to do it. And she wouldn't hold my hand. Nope. That's all she said. Well, do you want to go ride Dumbo? Yep. Will you hold my hand? Nope. I said, well, you want to lead the way? Dumbo's that way. We did at least ride the Dumbo guy together, but grandkids are. Anyways, one of the things I want to talk about in terms of domestic violence and the dysfunction of the family is, if you guys didn't ever get a chance to read the book Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance about his life, some of this, there are definitely some similarities. There's a lot of violence, a lot of alcohol or abuse in the family and stuff like that. And what comes away is you have imperfect people trying to be the best people they can be. Certainly in his book, his grandparents, completely, terribly imperfect people, violent alcoholics, but they were trying to do the best they can with this one kid, J.D. Vance, and ultimately they did the best they could, and they put him on a right path. So dysfunctional people trying to find it in themselves to do what the best they could for their grandkid, and I guess I see a little of the similarities with Mildred. She's definitely a problematic person, but she's trying to do something right for her daughter, her dead daughter. I think maybe sometimes she's leaving her son behind a little bit here, but that's kind of, I see it, very dysfunctional family, and they're trying to do the right thing as best they can, even with these emotional issues they have, or the stunted intellectual capacity. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah, it's pretty much. I got cousins that grew up in Missouri, so
Misery. Well, we got to be careful. The person who owns the channel, I think he lives in Missouri. Missouri. I'm sorry.
Missouri.
Missouri.
Don't worry. He call it that himself too. So
does he calls it misery too? I mean, I was driving across country one time, and we went from it's adjacent to Texas. Well, no, it's Oklahoma. And we were driving, by the time, and we went straight through from California. Some deputy retired. He left the department and moved back east to Michigan. And I said, well, I'll drive back with you because I'm from Michigan. I took the time off, and man. Straight through in a U-Haul with the governor on it that only lets you go 55 miles an hour towing a car. That is brutal, let me tell you. Took us 17 and a half hours, took the southern route, and by the time we hit Missouri, it was misery. It wasn't Missouri. And same with Oklahoma and Texas through the Panhandle. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, shouldn't really be throwing Missouri under the bus, because it's just as bad in Alabama, Arkansas.
I know. It was just, I was
ready. And even there's some northern states that are screwed up with some backward ass country people. But yeah, there's definitely a difference from a small town mentality in a lot of these backward places. Because first of all, some states, the education system isn't all that great, so have to deal with cultural. What do you you wonder why you're driving through Montana, and in California it says don't drink and drive. In Oregon it's driving high or buzzed is a crime. In Montana they have signs talking about using heroin and drugs and meth and all that.
Yeah, well, a lot of those country places they have all those meth and all that other stuff and fentanyl.
Meth is a big thing where the small area I'm at, the rural area I'm at, that town has a big meth problem.
Yep.
They just don't have anything other to do than get in trouble.
Yeah. But yeah, when I went to the University of Montana in '83, there was the minimum drinking age was 18. And during the day, there was no speed limit.
Wow.
There was a speed limit at night because you have to use your headlights. You don't have the same visibility. But during the day, just go whatever you get pulled over for being unsafe. But for the most part, there's no speed limit. And then,
Wow.
things changed over time, of course, but yeah, drinking age was 18. We were always out drinking.
Okay. Well,
on 28 December 1975, I got onto an airplane at LAX. It was a Santa Ana weather day, so it was
Yeah.
nice and warm, and about 200 and some odd of us got on this airplane. We landed in St. Louis, Missouri, in a snowstorm and a snow and ice storm. We were all dressed like it was LA. We get off this thing, and the corporals and the drill sergeants started yelling at us to get on this whole stinky bus where we froze our butts off going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I spent 2 months at basic training there playing in the ice.
Yeah.
So that's my memory of misery, because it was misery.
It was misery. All right. Well,
When
we won't
we
keep
got
slamming
married,
on the. We won't keep slamming
well,
on
our
this
first
kid.
stop when we got married in '84 was a 3-day drive to Memphis because I had to report into the Marine Corps base in Billington, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So we drove all night, and our first stop was Festus, Missouri, on the border of Tennessee and Missouri. We went back there last year. I had a tire problem on my way up to Chicago, and we went to took the exit to go to look at the hotel. We were there in '84. It's a big shopping mall now. They're like, what hotel? These guys,
It
I grew
improved
up
a
here. I
little
don't
bit.
remember any hotel here.
Well,
Yeah, it was.
that's that development. All the people are leaving blue states to go to those red states, as you know, Scott. Right. So,
Yeah.
well, how far are you from the border of Missouri? I keep wanting to say
Well,
Missouri.
I'm probably I'm 3 hours from the border of Arkansas, probably
Yeah.
3.5 to Missouri. I'm 45 minutes to the border of, or about an hour from the border of Alabama. Alabama is directly, and basically there's one county between mine and Alabama. So,
Okay.
like, I bought my ATVs in Alabama.
Ah. Okay. All right, let's get back to the movie. This one we're going to do Suicide Aftermath, and the character development of our chief is he's got cancer, and and they show he's got a good relationship with his wife and his kids, but he doesn't want to go through cancer. I don't show the suicide here, but he does ultimately commit suicide because he doesn't want to go through the pain of the pancreatic cancer or have his wife. A lot of that is they don't want to see him in a weakened state, right? He doesn't want to go through that, right? And so he kills himself, but it does have this dramatic impact on the small town, right? On certainly the wife and the kids, but also most particular Dixon, right? Now I got to say this. Why are all these cops in the station all the time? This is a small town where they got 10 guys in this station all the time. They need to be out working, but that's the chief coming out of me, So
That's because
The
they're
small town vibe, Pat. That's the small town vibe.
that's because they were all called a racist police department, and Dixon was a racist cop who only beat black people. So
Yeah.
I just
he'd been
I
in
mean,
trouble for that. So
don't you have something to do, like just drive around? I don't know, but I don't.
maybe there's only one road and it goes by 3 billboards.
There you go. Exactly. Well,
But
I mean, that's the small town. Like, there's a barbecue place in the town that we go to that actually it has a Walmart, so that's why we always go there. But you'll see 3 units sitting outside the barbecue stop. It's called the barbecue pit, and you'll see 3 units there all day.
really, yeah, that
Yeah,
would
the
drive
only time you see them out patrolling is when schools get out.
that would
They'll
drive
be
me
hanging out,
crazy.
driving around the schools, making sure that nobody is going over 15 miles an hour.
Well, they must not have any crime going on because that would drive me crazy watching that every single day. And and so our guy Dixon here, let me get the actor's name again here because it's
Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell. He is he's impacted by the chief staff, right? And he obviously the likely inference is that the chief was so ashamed and embarrassed about the billboards as that he killed himself. But we all know that's not true. And deep down, he probably knows it's not true, but he wants a little bit of payback. And I have to tell you, just his whole gait and how he looks, you just think this is a kind of a bofo that's a cop here, right? And right, I mean,
Haven't heard that in a long time.
yeah, I don't even remember what bofo stands for. I just know the acronym, and he goes over and he's going to take it out on Red, right? The advertising guy who wouldn't give him the name, although they figured out it was Mildred. And
these small towns, these guys don't like the deputy sheriffs in my county in Tennessee. I think they make $18 an hour.
Yeah,
And they make less than a person working McDonald's here in California.
yeah.
So they're not.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, half of them have never been to the academy, because you go to the academy, you can get a job working in Nashville for $80 to $90 to $100,000 a year. And then these little small towns, I was talking to a deputy about it, and he's like, "I never been to the academy. They're waiting to send me when they have enough money."
Wow.
Yeah, so I get these small towns. I mean, our police department growing up was pretty well funded because they got government money because of the naval base that was in my small town. So they got government subsidized by the federal government so we always have more than enough cops, unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly, but you're right, Scott. Is when I was in the Army, I was an MP in the Army, and we had several guys that were cops in small towns in the South, and they quit and joined the Army because they were making more in the Army at $400 a month than they were at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These guys had families and kids, and so they were probably bringing in $400 or $500 a month. That was more than that they were making on a cop job in some small town.
Yeah, the deputy I was talking to, his second job was working at the local hardware store.
Wow.
He was off duty.
Insane.
Wow. Yeah,
and that's where you get these bofos from. Is they don't have a lot to choose from.
Yeah, because the good
Nobody
guys,
ever says, "I'm going to go be a cop at Ebbing, Missouri."
well, they leave and they go to college and do something else. But here our Dixon, our hero here, he goes over, he pistol whips Red, breaks the window, and throws Red out the window in front of this black guy who just by the scene, okay, that's not a good. And then you see his badge, right? But even before that happens, okay, this is not going to go well for Dixon, right? Maybe he would have survived it had our what we find out is our new chief didn't see it, but our new chief saw it. But I that's why I think this is, in terms of the character Dixon, this impulsive, over the top. This is, how does a guy like this last? And of course, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the largest sheriff's department, where we go to the academy, we have checks and balances and all that stuff. Even though the liberal left doesn't acknowledge that, there's accountability in our department, and you didn't see that with Dixon here when he was dealing with Red at all. So,
oh no.
I always wanted to throw someone out a window, though.
Just on principle. But the funny thing is, that was, to me, was this is the day the chief kills himself at night. So the next morning, this guy shows up and says, "I was sent here to take over as chief of police."
Yeah, that's pretty quick. I know.
Like,
yeah.
There hasn't even been like 12 hours from the time he killed himself to now, and you were already there.
That's efficiency.
I know they gotta. Yeah, I guess.
Well, that's that movie magic. We do have some of that movie magic there. Sometimes the story just needs a little bit of push to keep it going. But she, Mildred hears that he's dead, and that it bothers her. You can tell it bothers her. The news media is reporting it. Chief Willoughby is dead, and where do they go? They go to the signs, right? And of course the inference is that she's the one who did it. She doesn't feel bad about the signs at all, but she clearly feels like, okay, well, I feel bad that he killed himself. That's not something she wanted, right? And I think deep down she knows that's not why he did it, right? She knows that he was suffering. So, if anything, because she saw him split up the blood, so But this is the aftermath. Now the guild, the billboards, the media going out to the billboards. Obviously, Dixon, you know, in a normal world, nothing like that would happen. Dixon throwing the advertising guy out the window, which is interesting. What happens with those guys later too. This is the interesting dynamic between in small towns. Do they forgive guys like this, Scott? I mean, do you have the dummy in town that everybody kind of, all right, well, that's just Joe, right? You know, so
Oh yeah, there was a cop growing up that actually my dad was. I've said this before on other shows that my dad was like a hoodlum, and my grandpa, you know, he came from a family where my grandpa worked in the shipyard, would come home drunk. He wouldn't beat up my uncle because he was a baseball star. He wouldn't beat up my grandmother or my aunt. He beat up my dad all the time. So my dad left at 14 and basically ran the streets until he was told your choice is the Marine Corps or go to jail. So he went in the Marine Corps. But there was a cop on the department, and every time we'd see him, my dad would look over and go, "I can't believe that guy's a cop. He's the biggest idiot." Blah 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 blah. And sometimes the guy would look over at my dad. My dad would flip him off, and me and my brothers would be like, "Whoa!" You know? He never said the F word until I was an adult around me, but he would flip him the bird all the time, and we're like, and he's like, he's the biggest idiot. He goes, I can't believe he even graduated. My dad never graduated. He goes, he don't, you know, used to make fun of him, and they would all make fun of him. And my dad would always say, it's a matter of time before that guy does something stupid and gets fired or goes to jail. Sure enough, when I was about, I think, a junior in high school, he got caught having sex with a young lady that he pulled over, and he ended up going. She pled that he, you know, forced her and raped her and all this other stuff, and he ended up doing like 5 years in prison. So there's always that. These small towns always have that one guy that's just everybody just shakes their head. Because I remember when I was a teenager, he'd pull me over and he'd write me a ticket for some stupid thing, and it's my dad's truck. It's not mine. I don't pay the registration.
right, right.
And he'd like, hey, give this to your dad. I'm sure he'll enjoy it. You know, stuff like that. And I'd be like, well, okay. He's like, I used to kick his ass when he was young, you know, stuff like that.
Like I told you, the bully
My
becomes the
dad
cop.
wasn't a big guy. What was that?
The bully becomes the cop, or the
Yep,
guy
the bully
who was
becomes the
bullied
cop.
becomes the cop.
Yeah.
The payback, a little bit of
Yeah.
payback. Yeah. Wow.
But,
That's
you know, you can't just say small departments because I've worked with a bunch of knuckleheads. So
yeah, I understand, but it's like you know, they can blend in. You know, you might get a knucklehead on your department. I mean, I had a few. God, remember Scott? We had a few, and
Oh,
that's why
oh,
we
got
have.
we got everybody's rejects until you started cleaning house.
yeah. What
That was
for,
Tanaka's thing. Was anybody that was a knucklehead at a station, send them to
send
transit.
it to transit, and so I had kind of a 3-strike rule. 3 strikes, you're out. You know, and I started really disciplining folks, and I finally said, you know, it's because what they were doing is they would make a settlement agreement on discipline that if you agree to transfer to transit, we'll reduce your discipline. And I got a couple of those in, and I called up my chief. I said, hey, this is horseshit. These captains at real stations don't seem to have the gumption to do their job, so they're just pawning it off on somebody else. You know, so this needs to stop. You know, because I'm gonna start making some noise about. And actually, God, it was I think Ronnie Williams heard me out, and they changed it. They said no more. No, you know, it can a transfer to some other unit cannot be part of your settlement agreement. So I'm sure that I still got a few knuckleheads, but at least it wasn't so overt, right? Because it was the island of misfits boys, but we had to turn it. We did turn that into something good, but we had to get rid of some of the worst, right?
It's
Well, I
like
think you
Park
can only
Drilling.
hide for so long, Pat.
Huh?
You can only hide for so long.
I know, but the thing about the bigger town is at least it's not everybody who knows you that sees you do stupid things, right?
Right.
You know, and you know, we got to figure out those folks before we get rid of them. Let's. Hey, we got a new guy in charge here, and he comes in, and of course, he confronts Dixon and immediately relieves Dixon of duty, which is interesting. And here there's obviously a racial dynamic here. He's a black guy. They're all a bunch of white dudes, and they're not treating him with they treat him with a little lack. Basically, who are you? Maybe I need to see your credentials. I don't. I think it's reasonable. Somebody's coming in and say, "Well, I'm here to take charge or whatever. I need to see your credentials." Do you? Yeah, I'd say, yeah, I do. I don't know who you are. I thought that was pretty reasonable.
Well, like Dixon, like who the fuck are you?
Yeah,
It's
no, it
like,
was
dude,
the
you don't
original
know this
desk,
guy.
But it's when Dixon's got no room to talk here, and I would have done exactly what this kid when I saw what Dixon did to Red there. But it was interesting when he says gun and badge, even though he hasn't clearly been identified who he is. He says, "I'm the guy who's supposed to take charge. Give me your gun and badge," and Dixon hesitates. But you can see that what I like is I always think, God, the force of personalities. He comes in, he's got a command presence. Our new guy, gun and badge. And you can just see our confident knucklehead here, feet on the desk, which would drive me crazy too. He immediately melts, right? He's dealing with somebody who's a real leader, somebody who is not going to back down. And even without full credentials, he surrenders. So I do enjoy this scene. He goes from being the confident knucklehead to, okay. And he can't find his badge too, because he probably lost it in the fight with Red.
No. When I was watching the movie, I was watching that, and I noticed that he didn't have a badge when he was up there on his, and I'm going, did these cops have badges then? Did all of them? It kind of like brain farted there. And then this scene came up and he's looking for his badge. You go, oh, I must have lost it someplace.
He's taking all the change and his car keys out of his pocket, looking for this badge.
Oh, he left his badge at home. Thank you for Martine for, but what do you think? Where he comes in, real leader, and you could see our Dixon here just kind of melt. His confidence melts. And really, without any real identification, really knowing who he is, he surrenders his gun and he acquiesces. That's the interplay of these two characters I thought was pretty good. There he is, gives his gun up. Yeah, obviously he knew what he did was wrong. Now he's just getting confronted by it.
Right.
So
Chief would let him get away with that kind of crap where.
Yeah,
I would not tolerate coming into a situation like that with somebody with their feet up on the desk. That just to me automatically signifies that you're lazy and you're not doing anything. Plus, being in a station, all those guys in the station, I would have been like, "What are you all doing here?"
Yeah, I like how he says it. What are y'all you crackers doing here? Get out! Don't you have anything to do? I'm like, finally somebody said something. 'Cause I'm like, what are you all doing in the station?
We're not crackers anymore.
I know.
We're saltines.
But
well, I like when he's leaving and he says to the desk sergeant, "Did he suspend me or fired?" He goes, "No, fired." Fired.
Which should have been happening anyways.
Oh, it should have happened a long time. I mean, the first time, they allude to it the whole movie that he beat the hell out of a black prisoner.
Yeah. For no
she
reason.
Tells them all, well, people use the N-word, but even she said, "You beat up any black people in jail lately?" And he's like, gives her shit back. But so he would have been gone. If I was a chief, I don't. Well, first of all, there's two factions where I live. One that like the sheriff, and the other half that doesn't like the sheriff because they think shady stuff's going on. So they're like, "Oh, you should run for sheriff." And I'm like, hell no. I go, first of all, somebody'd probably kill me because it would be. They wouldn't want. I would have no deputies. It would just be me patrolling. I don't suffer fools, so.
Well, it's hard, we don't realize how much training we got and how,
Yeah, unless you go to these small town areas, you don't realize, like I said, they get $18 an hour. They have to buy their own equipment. They have to buy, Most of them don't even have uniforms. They just pin the badge on, like they pin the badge on their shirt because they have
Yeah.
to. I've never seen any of them in a real uniform. So they have to buy their own equipment. They have to buy their own guns. They get a badge, and then they get $18 an hour.
Yeah.
So
Hell no.
So this is
sometimes
this
you can't fire them because who else are you going to get? You know, if I fire this guy, I have nobody working early morning shift, graveyards. I got nobody out there.
this is a scene where this guy comes to town and he goes into Mildred's shop and he asking about the billboards, and of course he's getting threatening to her, and eventually somebody walks in and kind of saves her here. But then he's probably our killer, or at least he knows what's going on, right? That's what's implied in this scene. And that does, when you start putting billboards up, you can shake something loose, right? And when you start bringing attention to it, people can get concerned. But I did want to talk a little bit about after the chief's death. We didn't get into it. He actually used some money to keep the billboards up, and he ends up. She gets a letter from the wife, and he jokingly says, "Well, I paid for another month for your billboard because I want everybody to think that those billboards were what killed me," and it was his joke to her, and they're going to stay up for another month with my name on it, right? And he said, I didn't kill myself because of your billboards, and that, but I'm going to have the last laugh on you. And so it's like this interplay between these two characters where they do care for each other and like each other, and he's gonna, hey, you made it a little hard on me, I'm gonna make it a little hard on you, but no hard feelings, kind of thing, And he does, I think in that time, I think in that letter, I can't remember when it would happen, he talks about, hey, eventually somebody's going to talk. We're going to eventually find this killer, which is what happens, right? Eventually somebody wants a deal. They know about the murder and they give information, or they do another crime and they run the DNA through CODIS again. And then now that pops up. They're going to break this case sooner or later. It just looks like it's going to be later. So the last comment of the chief to Mildred, what do you think, Danny? He leaves it a letter, and I'm going to keep the billboards up just to kind of stick it to you a little bit. All in fun.
Thought that was classy because you go back, and I can't remember if it was right before the suicide or right after this. One of the scenes around there is where someone was back into the Red's office and getting on him about the money for the billboards and where the money's coming from and everything like that. And then Red's secretary comes in and says, "Oh, look, someone just gave us this for the billboard." And so I'm thinking, where did that come from? Yeah. And then later on to see that he paid for it.
That was
that the chief paid for it. That was kind of, in a way, his suicide he thought out really well. Yeah. Because he wrote letters to his wife. He wrote letter to Mildred. He wrote a letter to people on his department. And then he hooded himself and put, "Don't take off the hood. My boys know what to do."
Right.
And so it was well thought out, more than just, "Oh, I'm pissed off because someone put up a billboard 30 days ago."
Yeah. No. And he made sure Mildred knew that. He didn't want her to think that had any part of it at all.
Yeah.
And ultimately somebody in response to this burns down the billboards. Now, of course, we all think it's Dixon, right? And that's what the movie implies. And it ends up being, I think the ex-husband kind of acknowledges it was him. And we see the scene. So we see the scene where they're burning and the son tries to, her and his son try to stop the burning, but that doesn't happen. And Mildred's response, let's roll with the arson burning scene right after this scene. Just roll it right in. Mildred's response is trying to burn down the police station. This is where it kind of gets a little out there, right? So a lot of creative writing. She gets these Molotov cocktails. Of course, if there's a bunch of Teslas parked in front of it, it's probably okay, right? The left would say, "Oh, that's fine. Why don't you understand? It's just meaningful
that's going to change people's minds. You go around and commit arson, that'll get people on our side.
It's legitimate. Yeah, it's just crazy what's going on. I did a show recently on Briefing with the Chief of swatting. Some guy that was he's a writer, and I had him on for another thing, and then he was swatted. He was one of the conservative writers, and I I actually wrote the article, and I lined him up to get on, and then right after I lined him to get on, he was swatted himself. So we ended up talking about, but this whole low level domestic terrorism that's going on, Molotov cocktails of Teslas and Tesla dealerships and all that stuff is crazy, right? It's crazy what's going on.
Well, they're so dumb they don't realize that a Molotov cocktail is considered a explosive device, so it's a
Yeah,
federal crime more than. And you go to prison from federal time. You don't get early outs like California. You got to
yeah,
do
20
80%
years is 20
of your
years.
time. Yeah, you get 20 years, you're doing 18,
yeah. That's
or you're
it's it.
eligible for parole.
You have to do 85% of a federal sentence. That's
Yeah.
85%. Okay, let's go ahead and roll with arson and burning. Martine, we'll roll with that scene, and because this is so one of the other persons that got a letter was Dixon, but it was sent to the station, and here, well, this is the scene where they're burning the billboards, right? And this is where she tries to put out the fires of the billboards, and of course she's unsuccessful. But of course, you're not going to be able to do that with just these handhelds.
Oh, those are some
No.
pretty powerful fire extinguishers.
Yeah, I know, because they did manage to put it out for one, but yeah, it's not going to happen. So that was, more movie magic, I guess. So, but she tries to put it out, and she ends up trying to Molotov cocktail the police department as well, right? And this is what brings Mildred and Dixon together. So I guess we'll get through this arson part, and this is the part where the son, you see the frustration of the son, right? And this is where I have I have problems with Mildred on a lot of things, but she is putting her son. She's got a son that she's still got to finish raising,
Right.
and she's putting a lot of this pain and frustration on him, and he is certainly understanding. But I think that part of it's unfair, right? He's still a teenager. He lost his sister as well. He knows the background behind it, this interchange between mom and his sister, and he understands it, but he's getting really frustrated because, she's placing the burden of that pain and her guilt all on him. Or not all of it, but a big chunk of it on him. And I think that's a mistake on her part for him. And it's just unfair to him. I don't know. What do you think of that, Danny? You kind of agree with that?
Yeah, she's putting all the burden or most of the burden on him, and he's, right now he's in that suck it up and deal with it type attitude because that's all he can do. He's still dependent on his mom, and so he has to deal with anything that she gives him, and then she's giving him a boatload of stuff, and you move on from this. That in real life, the son there would be unpacking this for years because if he ever was successful at unpacking it.
Yeah,
and just a lot of issues there, and I've seen that a lot. Like I said before, I've been to enough family disturbances involving kids where you see these kids and they're just screwed up because their parents made them that way because the parents couldn't deal with the trauma that they were dealing with. The kid's got his own trauma dealing with, and now he's got to deal with the trauma that his parent or his mother's given him. It's like all screwed up.
Yeah, and of course he wants to be loyal to his mom because it was his dad who left and all that other stuff, and he's clearly not a passive guy. The dad, he could be, domestic violence, right? So he could.
I just call him straight out an Adam Henry, man.
Yeah, and it works to humiliate her too, right? Just as he does when she goes out to dinner. That's a little later here. We'll just roll right into this scene right after this. We got to catch up a little bit, so roll right into the Dixon and Mildred scene when this is done, Martine. So because after this, where the billboards are burned, she's thinking. I think she believes it's the cops who did it, right? In response to yeah, she clearly thinks it's Dixon or the cops who did it, and so she firebombs the police station. Of course, this is where it gets off the rails on any real life thing where this, and Dixon is he goes into the police station to read a letter that's left to him by the chief, right? And the chief is explaining what he needs to be a good man, right? And how he needs to let his anger go and whatever that is. And now he's inside, and the one thing he feels like he needs to do as he's inside and the place is burning is he sees the file for, yep, the character like him is a guilty conscience. Yeah, he has a guilty conscience because he was such a jerk. And he at least saves the murder file for the daughter. Not that that means anything, but at the time it means something to him. All right, the only way I can show compassion here in this burning building is at least do something good by saving the murder file for the daughter, right? So that they can continue the murder investigation. And I guess this is where he flips and he realizes, to be a good cop and to be a whatever good detective is what the chief kind of implies. You have to have some level of compassion for others, right? You need to let your own anger go. And here he goes. No one will think you're gay, right? So obviously that's where that gay reference is. So there's a lot of anger in that. And if you don't arrest them for homophobia, so there's obviously the chief knows something about him that is you don't really understand in the movie, and that's the first. So there's some anger on his part over this, maybe his sexuality. Who knows for sure, because they don't really make it clear. But he then tries to do the right thing, even though he doesn't have to. And of course, Mildred sees him flop out of the building, and she realizes, oh shit, this building was not empty. She thought it would be empty, which is okay. I'm unusual that we always had 24-hour coverage in our sheriff stations, but that's probably what happens in a small town. Is they close up at night and then somebody's on call from home, right? I guess.
Come down here and go to any of the local sheriff stations. They close at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
In San Diego?
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so.
Doors at 5 in the afternoon. Doors are locked. It's crazy.
Oh, I did. He did Burgess too. We did Burgess. That was I don't know.
Bruce, we did that one.
Bruges, yeah, Bruges, yeah. That was a good movie too. But this is where you see the compassion of Mildred come out. One, she's oh my God, there was somebody in there, and that's absolutely not what she wanted. She had called to make sure, and he's listened to headphones, so he doesn't pick up. And that's when she starts the firebombing. And this is where our vertically challenged actor comes in here and gives a alibi. Here's Dixon rolling out on fire. And he gets put out by the midget, whereas Mildred seeing it. And it gives an alibi to Mildred, and she agrees to go to dinner with them, which doesn't fare well for anybody, I think, in this movie.
She picked the wrong. She didn't have an out plan. No, she goes, okay, I can firebomb this place, but she didn't have an out plan.
Then what do I do?
She picked the wrong guy for an alibi, and didn't sit there and say, "Oh, we've been dating for a month." Everybody knows that's not true.
Yeah,
right.
I just,
everybody would know if they've been dating for a month.
Yeah.
I when they go to dinner, and of course the husband mocks her because the ex-husband mocks her because he ends up being at dinner with his 13-year-old. I mean, his 19-year-old, but it's funny. He goes, okay, so I'm, this is the actor Peter, I forget his last name, but
Dinklage.
Yeah, he says, okay, so let me understand this. I'm the used car dealer with a little bit of a drinking problem, and I'm a dwarf. And you're the psycho mom who firebombed the police station, and I'm the bad catch. I like how he framed it, because he's right. You're the whack job who just firebombed that I protected, and I'm the bad catch. You don't want to be seen with me. And he's right. He's right. So but he ends up saving her, right?
Yeah, he was her alibi.
He was her alibi.
Even though the new chief, he doesn't buy it.
No, he doesn't buy it. Yeah, because he's been around the block. I forget. He's from the sheriff's office, I think, eventually. I don't know how big their sheriff's offices are there, but they're at least probably a couple hundred, right? So that's...
Yeah, he's like, yeah, okay. Okay.
He's probably thinking, what did I agree to get into?
Yeah. Whose idea was this shit?
To send me here.
That is off.
Well, I don't do this scene, but there's right after this scene, Dixon's in the hospital, and him and Red end up in the same room, right? So Red is the advertising guy that he threw out the window, and he's pretty messed up. Red is, and you can see him. And then Dixon gets rolled in, and he's got all these bandages on him, and of course Red, being, hey, wow, man, you look terrible. He doesn't know, obviously don't know who he is because all the bandages are covering his face. You want some orange juice, and then Dixon then apologizes to him, and Red goes to his bed, doesn't want anything to do with this guy, and then pours him an orange juice and puts it on his. So for me, I can't, it's like I don't think I'd want to have anything to do with the guy that threw me out a window. But
No,
they've known each other since they were kids. A lot of these people, right? And they're in that same town. And he goes and gives them some orange juice with a straw that he could drink out of, right?
Dixon's probably thinking, here's this guy. I know who he is. He doesn't know who I am. And if he finds out, I'm dust because I messed him up pretty good. And it just goes from there. So when Red shows the compassion of giving the orange juice, Dixon, it just threw him completely out of his game and put him in a different role. So Dixon then apologizes or tries to apologize, and it was wild because you're totally expecting Rudd to sit there and just like push him out of the bed or do something.
Right.
Yeah, I thought he was going to throw him out of the window or something.
Well,
Go
here it is. Oh, I did catch this in the scene, but here he is. He was all decked out like that. What'd you say? The photography in this movie is quite murky and dense. Yeah, they got like 7 Academy Award nominations. So here's the interaction. Yeah, you look at Red, man. I feel bad for Red. All he was is the guy who sold the billboards. And some cop throws him out a window. Wow, it's crazy. And I did. So this is kind of, initially you would think this is an anti-cop movie, but it really isn't about police. It's about the relationships of people in a small town in which police are part of it, given the situation.
Yeah, I thought he was going to throw Dixon out of the window.
Yeah.
To get back at him, but
yeah, that's not who he is. That's not who he is.
Yeah.
So what I like best is how quickly Dixon heals.
Yeah.
I want to go to that burn unit.
Exactly.
Here's Red thinking, "Oh, you? That's you?" Yeah, look at his face. I mean, I'm sorry. You're sorry for what? And then he recognizes who he is. I feel bad for Red. I liked his character too. He's a good character and not a bad guy, just making money off advertising.
Yeah,
kind of like us. We're just former Crown employees trying to scrape together a living.
Yeah.
Well, he's a small town. I imagine he probably had some other hustles going, and
yeah, I can't imagine there was a lot of advertising in the small town there.
Yeah, that was probably his biggest client there for a while.
Yeah.
$5,000 a month, that could pay rent and bills and my bar tab. So,
but this is you see Dixon finally changing, right? I mean, he's saving the file, doing the apology. He's doing his penance. Not that it means a whole lot for him. I mean, he's done as the police, probably only making $18 an hour anyways, and now he's stuck living with his mom all day. I don't know who's paying the bills. I guess mom and dad's pensioner are probably paying the bills. And now he's stuck at home with mom. He can't even leave because of it, right? Probably not good for him. Probably not good for him. And the next scene, let's roll right into the next scene. And that is possible suspect. And this is interesting. So our hero here, heel to hero, I guess is probably the best way to say it. Dixon is getting drunk in a bar, and he overhears a conversation, which you think, wow, this is going to break the case. And of course, his way of dealing with it is he goes outside and he hears this guy talking about committing a rape, and he goes out and he sees checks out their license plate, and he comes back and he gets in a confrontation with them, and scratches his face, and that gets his butt kicked. But he's thinking he's got the DNA from this guy, and I think maybe just getting the plate number might have worked, and then given the story. But this is our heel to hero. He's trying to do the right thing at this point, and he gets his butt kicked in this bar. And I don't know, what'd you think of this scene, Scott?
I think it was brilliant on his part, but then just that he took a butt kick into just to preserve that DNA that he got from scratching the guy's face. But I found it odd when he's in the threatening Mildred in the gift shop.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I don't know, if I'm this guy now, I'm like, why would I ever come, like when it's revealed later about the DNA, but it's like, why would you come out of the woodwork and make yourself a prime suspect? Why would he go into the gift store and threaten her when it's like, dude, you weren't anywhere near Ebbing. So now you're just going to come and then the wife comes in and gives her the letter and he leaves, and then he goes to a bar. Now, if you're that worried, why would you go to a bar later that night?
Yeah.
And start bragging about her rape?
So he does get the DNA, and they test the DNA, and it proves not to be him, which is kind of weird because the way they set it up.
Right.
So the way they set it up, because he comes in the shop earlier, is that he is the suspect trying to scare Mildred off, but then he makes his comment in the bar, and it turns out not to be him, which is really weird. My only gripe with the movie, is it misled the audience in masking the guy's threat to her and at the story. Yeah, I agree with that, Martine. This didn't fit. So that part didn't fit for me, and we don't find out till a little bit later that he actually wasn't the suspect, but at least I think the part of it is the character development of Dixon goes from being, like I said, the heel to the hero, where he's trying to do the right thing, probably in a pretty unconventional way, Danny, but it is an effort to try and square what he's done wrong to a lot of people in town, Red, Mildred, you name it, right?
Yeah, he's trying to
Right.
fix all of his mistakes and fix his wrongs and try to regain his relationship and regain his reputation. And while talking about reputation, Bill just made a comment, and I want to thank him for the kind comment. But he's trying to rebuild. He's got to remake himself, and then they're going to decide to go out and in the next couple of scenes to go out and kill a guy for no reason.
Oh, I see the comment now. Yeah, Danny does sound like Clint Eastwood. Doesn't look like him, but he sounds like him.
Yeah, I'm more guapo.
A little shorter. I actually saw Clint Eastwood. I was attending the Naval Postgraduate School, and we were up in Monterey, and he had a kind of owned a hotel and bar up there, and they wanted the girls in the class wanted to go, and we had a Coast Guard captain, and we had an admiral, and we had these high level, and we go there, and he's there at the bar having tea and toast. And of course, I didn't bother him, but they did. Let's see.
Yeah, I think Gene was right there on that statement.
Dixon wants to be a cop. The chief believed he could be. Yeah, that's exactly right. And he'll never be a cop again, but he's at least trying to be a better person than he was, right? And which is what this is all about. And that's why like I said, it's hard to figure out who had the best role in this one, Mildred or Dixon's role or Red's role. I mean, we had a lot of really good actors who played. I mean, Harrelson did a good job, but I don't think his character was the best role to play in the movie if you're an actor. I think maybe Dixon was the best role for a male thing here. And although I liked Red's thing too, his role was pretty good as well.
Yeah, Mildred nailed it.
Yeah,
she did a really good job.
Yeah,
she's married to one of the Coen brothers. She's been in a lot of their movies.
Well,
Fargo.
I've been wanting to do Fargo. I haven't done that one yet, and because I really liked Fargo, I thought it was kind of a well, obviously it's a black comedy, right? And but it does have a law enforcement theme, so I've been thinking about doing it. I'll do it down the road here, but I just it would give me post-traumatic stress to look at those cold winters because that's the kind of environment I grew up in, and I have no desire to do any of that in the future. So that's why I stay in crazy California. I guess I can find another warm weather state to live in where we don't have these crazy policies. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful we'll have a Republican governor maybe this next time around. We'll see. We'll see. Since 50% of the polls show 50% of Californians are ready for a Republican. We'll see how that works out after the cheating, though, because they do cheat here. Here it is. I lost my badge. I can't remember where I lost it, and he does eventually give the chief does sit down with them, and they go over this evidence, and he ends up giving his badge to him. All right, just roll right into the scene. The husband, or no, this is the we already did possible suspect. Let's roll right into the scene with Mildred and Dixon. This is the last scene. I think this is the final. As soon as it's over, roll into this one. During the course of their meal, where she's sitting down with our vertically challenged, the husband does acknowledge that he's the one who actually burned the billboards. Here's our chief telling Dixon that the guy was not the suspect. And it's funny because the chief says, "Hey, good work, but that's not the guy." So this guy probably has zero patience for this guy, but he does sit down with him and goes over it with him, and he treats him with respect both ways, and he recognizes the effort. I don't think he believes that Dixon's making it up. You did hear this. We don't think he's good for any rape. It doesn't test for any rape, and maybe he was just bragging, right? So. But what I thought in the scene, this is exactly what Harrelson's character. Somebody will be bragging, somebody will talk about it. It'll be solved. It just happens to not be this on this particular event, right? But if we roll in, go ahead.
A lot of things got solved. Back in when I was in the academy, we used to do patrol rides.
Yeah.
And one of the guys in my academy class, he was on a patrol ride at Lomita Station, and his parents lived in Lomita's area up in Rancho Palos Verdes. And they get a call one night, assault with a deadly weapon, possible person dead, and all this other stuff. It was his parents' address. It turns out the actual murder happened like right below them, which is San Pedro City of LA. And it was an LAPD thing. So they roll up to his parents' house, and he's all freaking out because his parents is there. Well, it turns out it was a hit murder. Some gangsters down from San Pedro were hired to go up and do this murder. They got caught because they're sitting in a hamburger stand, down on Gaffey Boulevard or Gaffey Road, BSing about this thing, and someone hears it and turns them in. That's how these things get solved sometimes.
That is exactly how these things get solved. Or this is why when we decriminalized everything, people complain, well, look at the clearance rate on this, because you just arrest people for selling narcotics or whatever, and they want a deal. And so, yeah, I heard so-and-so talk about this, that he did this murder on this date at this time. I want a deal, right? And when you stop arresting people and you decriminalize everything, you lose those opportunities to solve those crimes. And I remember I did that. I talked about it in the podcast. It says, this is purposeful. Their goal is to limit the ability of law enforcement to be effective, and then say, look how expensive it is, and look at their clearance rate. So they do everything to handcuff you, and then they talk about how incapable you are because you've cut up all their avenues for solving crimes. That's. And that isn't just happening in California. That's happening in all of these progressive cities as well. That is the game plan of what's happening. I will tell you, you guys. So Fair and Just Prosecution was the organization that's been kind of controlling all these progressive prosecutors, funded through the Tides Foundation. which is given money by George Soros. So George Soros Open Foundation gives to the Tide Center. Tide Center gives to this group. And Miriam Krinsky, who had been worked for Sheriff McDonald, she started Fair and Just Prosecution after she left the LA County Sheriff's Department. And she recently stepped down. She got accused of harassing her employees and racism. So she decided to spend more time with her family. I just think it's funny that, but she was a hardcore lefty who started that. And as soon as it became something big and she became toxic because they started focusing on her. I know I did a show on her. Suddenly she's pushed out. Same with Gascon. Gascon was an advisor to that group, and they took him down as an advisor just as the election was getting here hot in LA. Their dames and the people themselves became really toxic, and they had to get rid of those people. And they got rid of her, and she was the one who started it. So I think George Soros cleans houses on those people because he didn't fund Gascons. If they feel you're a liability, they get rid of you, and they'll bring in some other useful idiot to do that kind of stuff.
Did it at the president level. They're going to do it to Newsom. You're watching the next 6, 8, 9 months. Newsom's going to be accused of something, and he's just going to go away because he's a liability to whatever agenda they're pushing right now. They're doing it to Chuck Schumer right now, so.
Well,
which is fine. They can make him go away.
He's backpedaling on everything because he wants to. He has this dream that he's going to be the president someday. Yeah. So now he's back. All his progressive stuff. Now he's backing away because he sees the tide has shifted somewhat, and now he's back. Oh no, I'm all for funding the police. I'm all for this, and you signed all this stuff that contradicts what you're now saying. So
the radical left is going to do away with him in the next couple of months.
Yeah. Well, I think he's neutered. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to see the money. If he's recalled, Soros won't step in to fund him. But I think the recall will fail. I think he'll finish his last 2 years, unfortunately, and we'll be stuck with them. But it's not going to happen for him, but he's slowly just getting rid of all these. If he sees you as a liability for his goal, then you're cut off, right? And that's what I see is going on. That's what happened with Gascon. I think that was happening with Miriam Krinsky at Fair and Just Prosecution, and I think that's happening with Gavin too, right? They push it so far in the state that he's become a liability himself, right? And so
they're all pissed off at Musk. They're all pissed off at Musk because of Doge, but. Sounds like Soros is doing his own version of Doge.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, look what they're doing to Biden. Biden's like, hey, I'll go out and campaign. And the Democrats are like, oh, no, just stay at home. We don't need your help. Stay at home.
Not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what's going on with them and at the national level, but that's all right. So back to our movie here. This is where Dixon tells her, he had told her he thought he had a suspect, and now he contacts her to tell her it's not the guy, but he knows where he lives, or it's not the DNA. He still thinks it's the guy, but he's not sure. And they kind of
says he may not be the rapist, but I know he did a rape.
Yeah, that's what he says, and so they're going to go and take him out. And this is a full circle. Mildred and Dixon. Let's roll with that scene. This is the last scene in the movie, and they're going to go and get this guy who they think actually did a rape, although probably not her daughter. Oh, you don't have that scene?
No,
I think you just played
I don't have the part in which they're in the car, but they have the conversation.
Oh, that's okay. Well, then we'll just finish up then. And but so they come together. They're going to drive to Idaho to deal with this guy. And Mildred says, how confident are you of this? And he says, I'm not really that confident. And, it implies that they turn around and go back, right? But they at least, here are these two troubled people coming together to be, I guess, human towards each other, right? Have some compassion. I'm sorry, I'm the one who burned. It was funny. What did he say? I am the one who burned the sheriff's station. Duh. Well, who else would it be, right?
Who else would have done it?
Duh. Who else would it be? And and he's let go of his anger, even though he's got scars on his face for the rest of his life. And I don't know. I just enjoyed the interplay of these different characters and how they developed through the movie and how they learn to tolerate each other. That can only happen in a small town, because I would move away from them in a big city. But that's what happens in the dynamics of a small town, right, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, people that, I don't know, people that have those are they gravitate towards one another eventually.
Yeah.
They've had all this trauma in their life, and he's got his issues, and everybody's. I mean, I think most of the scenes somebody is drinking.
Yeah.
Bar
Yeah.
scene, dinner scene. There's always some kind of alcohol involved, which is quite
Part of
true
the
in a lot
problem.
of small towns. Is that
Yeah.
there's. I used to go out when I was young, hang out with my grandpa at the White Pig Tavern. That's where everybody went.
Yeah.
So I would sit there while he drank beer with his buddies. I mean, that's where everybody went. That was like your social. That's where everybody went out to find everything, right?
Yeah.
And or to gossip and tell stories, or that's just the way small towns are. That's like the convention center where everybody goes to. Hey, did you hear this? No, I didn't hear that. Have you heard this? No, it's. But everything in the movie revolved around alcohol and violence.
So Danny, the one of the final scenes here is, and this is where Mildred, you gave me one day of hope. You worked it. You tried to solve this. You thought it was the guy. You gave me one day of hope. I haven't had hope in a long time. And it also tells her that somebody cared beyond just her. And
Right.
believe it or not, it was Dixon. I think that's really the final sentiment of the movie. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, she after Dixon she burnt Dixon. That was her fault. But
Yeah.
That she threw some compassion on him, and he all of a sudden just got off his high horse that I'm a bitching city cop.
Yeah.
He got off his high horse, saved the file, like you said. That was a very thing. But taking a beating like he did to get the DNA, to think this is how I'm going to do what Martine says, is that Dixon wanted to be the cop that Willoughby wanted him to be. And so these are just a couple of different people stepping forward and realizing we got to do the right thing. And that's what she did. That's what he did. And then, you get back to the small town thing back in Avalon, they had the bars for the locals. They never had any issues or anything. There was a lot of drinking in there.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, or ex-husband, ex-wife stuff, all of this stuff going on. And we came up with the saying about all these people that are splitting up because it's a small town. One day you like someone, the next day you hate them. Well, you never really break up. You just lose your place in line. And that's
like that.
that's basically how it is in a small town. One day these guys are your friends, and the next day they're stabbing you in the back, and the next day they're buying you a beer. I mean, it just goes back and forth like that.
Well, that kind of captures the sentiment of the movie, Danny. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we are at the end of our movie review. 3 Billboards in Ebbing, Missouri. Martine, I think we're done. You can take it away. Stick around for debrief, you guys.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.